There's this moment right at the edge of morning when the world feels suspended. It's not fully dark, it's not fully light. The birds are just beginning to test their voices, and the air holds the weight of night. And that's where we find her, Mary, standing outside of a tomb, weeping. Not the kind of weeping that's quiet and kind of shakes a little bit, but the extreme weeping that takes over your body. The kind that comes when something has been taken from you that you can't replace. She's already lost him once. She watched him die. She watched him collapse in real time. She watched the one who carried love so fully be crushed by the systems of power and fear. And now this, his body gone, which means for Mary, grief had nowhere to land. There's no place to visit, no place to bring her sorrow, no place for her to say goodbye. And so she stands there, just weeping. And if we're honest, this kind of in-between space is where a lot of us show up on Easter. Not in triumph or in certainty, but somewhere in that in-between space. Hiding loss, holding questions, holding things that have not turned out the way that we expected. Some of us walked in today carrying things that were heavy. A diagnosis, fractured relationship, a quiet loneliness that's been growing over time, and a grief that still surprises us by how sharp it is. Church communities that have hurt us and families that have hurt us. Some of us here are here because we were invited. And some of us are here because this day matters, even if we're not sure why. Some of us are here because we're hoping that something might feel different after we leave this place. That maybe, just maybe, there is something alive in this story. And Mary is standing right there with us. She doesn't come to the tomb expecting resurrection. She comes expecting death. She comes to tend to that which has already ended. And then something strange happens. She looks in the tomb and she sees two angels there who ask her a question. Why are you weeping? And she answers honestly, they took my master, and I don't know where they put him. Then she turns, and she sees somebody standing there, but she doesn't recognize him. She thinks he's the gardener, which I think is one of the most beautiful and overlooked details in this whole story. Mary is looking directly at resurrection and can't see it. She's standing in front of new life, and it looks ordinary. It looks like somebody who's tending the garden, someone who works quietly, somebody who helps things grow. She thinks he's the gardener. But maybe she's not wrong. Because from the very beginning, God has been the gardener. In Genesis, God is planting life, shaping the earth, and breathing into dust. And here on this first Easter morning, resurrection begins in a garden, a place of soil, of growth, a place where things look dead but aren't yet finished. She thinks he's the gardener. And then he speaks. Woman, why are you weeping? At this point, I would have punched somebody. The second time somebody asked me why I'm weeping, I would have said, it's none of your business, leave me alone. And Jesus says, who are you looking for? And she doesn't recognize him until he says her name, Mary. In that moment, everything changes. Not with Jesus giving a speech or an explanation or pulling out some kind of proof, with her name. Because resurrection is deeply personal. It's relational. She knows him not by what he's saying about resurrection, but by how he says her name. Mary. And suddenly she sees Rabboni, teacher, friend, the one that she thought she lost is standing right in front of her alive. And here's what's so important for us to notice. Nothing about Mary's circumstances changes before that moment. For her, the grief was still real. The cross had still happened. The world was still as uncertain as it was when she came to the garden that day. Resurrection doesn't erase the pain. Instead, it meets Mary inside of it. And this is where the Easter story becomes more than a story from long ago, because we're living in a world that feels in many ways like Holy Saturday, caught between what's been lost and what has yet to fully come alive. We're watching wars unfold across the globe. We're seeing division deepen in our own country. We're carrying the weight of systems that don't always reflect the dignity of every human life. And on a personal level, many of us are navigating things that feel like endings. Dreams that didn't materialize, relationships that shifted or broke, versions of ourselves that we've outgrown or lost, and it can feel like we're standing in a tomb, weeping, not really knowing what's coming next. And it's into that space that Easter speaks. Not as denial or bypassing the reality of Mary, but as a quiet, steady, persistent truth that love is still at work. Even here, even now, even in the places that look like endings. Mary thought she was standing at a place of finality, but she was really standing in the place of transformation. She thought her story was over, but she was standing at the beginning of something that she could yet even imagine. So what if that's true for us too? What if some of the places in your life that feel most like endings are also the places where new beginning is taking root? Not quickly or obviously, but quietly, like a gardener working beneath the surface, because that's how resurrection tends to unfold, in a slow and steady recreation of life. It looks like healing that happens over time. It looks like courage that grows in small moments. It looks like connection being rebuilt where there was distance. It looks like hope returning in ways you didn't expect. Mary recognizes him when he calls her name. And I wonder what it might look like for us to listen for that too, in the quiet places of our lives, where love keeps showing up, where grace keeps meeting us, where something that was once hardened has begun to soften. Because if resurrection tells us anything, it's this: God does not abandon what God loves. Not to death, not to despair, not the worst thing that could happen in this world, nor the worst thing that could happen to you. God does not leave. He keeps showing up. God keeps calling our names. God keeps bringing life out of places that feel barren. And then Jesus says something completely unexpected. He says, Mary, don't cling to me. Which can feel confusing at first. Because after all that she's been through, weeping in this garden, of course she wants to hold on. But what Jesus is inviting her into is something bigger. He's inviting her to a new way of relating, a new way of living, a new way of participating in what God is doing in the world. Because resurrection is not something to hold on to as a moment. It's something that we step into as a movement. And then God gives her her calling. The first apostle. Go to my brothers and tell them. Mary becomes the first witness to the resurrection. The first preacher of Easter. Don't let anyone tell you women can't preach. Because the first one was Mary. The first one to tell the world the story that love was not lost and that death was beaten and that Christ was alive, which means the story doesn't end at the tomb. It continues through people, through communities, through movements and moments where we embody the life that we've been given. And this is where it becomes real for us, church. Because Easter is not just something we celebrate once a year, it's something we participate in. Every time we choose connection over isolation, every time we extend compassion where it'd be easier to withdraw, every time we work for justice in a world that often settles for less, every time we make space for someone else to belong, every time we connect with people who are different than us, every time we offer kindness and goodness in a world that seems to have lost those values. We are living the resurrection. And I think about all of us who have found our way here today. Some of us have been here for years. Some of us are finding our way back after a long time. And some of us are stepping into this place for the first time. But each of us carry a story. All of us are holding something that may not be visible on the surface. And what if this space could be like the garden for us? A place where we encounter love in a way that feels personal. A place where we're reminded, maybe for the first time in a long time, that we are known by name, that we matter, that our stories aren't over. Because resurrection is not just about what happens to Jesus a few millennia ago. It's what continues to happen in us, in our lives, and in our relationships, and in our world. So don't miss this. What began in the garden does not stay in the garden. Resurrection did not stay hidden in the morning light. It moved, it spread, it found its ways through locked doors, into fearful hearts, into communities that thought the story was over. And it's still moving. It's still rising. It's still bringing life where we thought there was only loss. So as you leave this place today, carry this with you. Where is life breaking through for you? Where is hope rising in a place that you think is dead? And what would it look like for you to trust that you are a part of God's story? That the gardener is still here, still tending, still calling things to life, calling us to life. Because the story's not finished. Church, love isn't finished. God isn't finished. And we aren't finished. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And resurrection is still unfolding. Please pray with me. Gracious God, we are grateful. As we stand in our own gardens and carry the weight of the world that seems to be holding us down, may we hear you speak our voice. May we be moved by your love to offer that love in this world. And may your resurrection begin in us.